For 76 years, one part of Japan's car market has never been touched by a foreign automaker. Not Ford, not Volkswagen, not Tesla. Nobody even tried. It is a segment that makes up roughly 40% of every new car sold in Japan, more than 1.6 million vehicles a year. And it has belonged to Honda, Suzuki, Daihatsu, and Nissan since 1949, until now. A Chinese company just built a car specifically to break in, not adapted, not imported as an afterthought, engineered from scratch for Japan only, priced at 2.5 million yen, almost exactly matching Japan's own best-selling electric mini car, down to the last few thousand yen. And here is the strange part. Outside of Japan, almost nobody is covering it. But inside Japan, officials are quietly calling it a wake-up call. Suzuki has named this company a direct threat. This is how BYD got in. Part 1. The Fortress. To understand why this story matters, you first have to understand a type of car that exists nowhere else on Earth. Japan calls them Kei cars, light automobiles. By law, they cannot be longer than 3.4 meters. They cannot be wider than 1.48 meters. Their engines are capped at 64 horsepower. On paper, they sound like a punishment. In reality, they are the most successful automotive category in the country. Last year, Japanese buyers took home 1,667,360 Kei cars. That is not a niche. That is roughly 4 out of every 10 new vehicles sold in the entire country. The best-selling vehicle in Japan is not a Toyota Corolla or a Camry. It is the Honda N-Box, a boxy little Kei van that has topped the national sales chart for 4 straight years. And here's the part most people outside Japan never hear. This segment has been a fortress since 1949. Think about that timeline for a second. In those 76 years, foreign automakers conquered almost every market on the planet. German brands took over luxury, American brands took over pickups, Korean brands took over value. But the Kei car segment in Japan, domestic only. Suzuki, Daihatsu, Honda, Nissan, Mitsubishi. A closed circle. To see how deep this runs, go back to where it began. In 1949, Japan was rebuilding from the war. Ordinary families could not afford real cars, and the country could barely afford the fuel to run them. So the government created a new legal category. Tiny vehicles, tiny engines, tiny taxes, to put the nation on wheels as cheaply as possible. The idea exploded. In 1958, came the Subaru 360, a bubble-shaped microcar so beloved the Japanese nicknamed it the Ladybug. Hundreds of thousands of families bought their very first car in that segment. The Kei car is not just a vehicle class in Japan, it is a national memory. It is the category in which the country taught itself to drive. That emotional weight is exactly why no outsider ever got in. It was never an official ban. No law says a foreign company cannot build a Kei car. The wall was built from something harder to legislate. Economics and identity. Kei cars are cheap, margins are razor thin. The regulations are so specific that you cannot simply shrink an existing model and ship it over. You have to design a car from a blank page for one country, with no chance of selling it anywhere else. For decades, every foreign automaker looked at that math and reached the same conclusion. Not worth it. Follow the chain and you can see why the wall held. Japan has narrow streets, so the law rewards small cars. Small cars get lower taxes, cheaper insurance, and easier parking rules. Those savings make Kei cars the default choice for millions of families, especially outside the big cities. That loyalty makes the segment enormous, and the size of the segment made it, ironically, invisible to outsiders. Too Japanese to touch. Here's the thing about walls, though. They only work until someone decides the prize on the other side is worth the cost of the climb. To sell cars in Japan, you do not need a showroom in Tokyo. You need a box on wheels in the countryside. And in October 2025, for the first time in history, a foreign automaker showed up with exactly that. But to understand why it happened now, you have to rewind 3 years to a launch almost everyone wrote off as a failure. Part 2. The company everyone wrote off. In July 2022, BYD announced it was entering Japan's passenger car market. The reaction honestly was a shrug. Japan is famously brutal for imports. This is the world's third largest automotive market, and yet foreign brands, all of them combined, hold only a sliver of it, a few percent of total sales in a good year. Otter. It is not tariffs that keep them out. Japan's import duties on cars are actually zero. The barriers are quieter and far more effective. Dealer networks that took half a century to build. Service expectations no newcomer can match on day one. And customers who have bought the same badge from the same local dealer across 3 generations of the same family. Even giants have been humbled here. Ford, one of the most powerful automakers in history, packed up and left Japan entirely back in 2016, admitting it saw no reasonable path to profitability. So when a Chinese EV maker from Shenzhen said it was coming, most analysts expected a quiet, polite failure. Another foreign badge that would rent expensive showrooms for a few years, sell a handful of cars, and slip away. At first, the numbers seemed to prove them right. BYD started selling its first model, the Atto 3 compact SUV, in January 2023. Then came the Dolphin hatchback, then the Seal sedan. The cars were competent. Reviews were fair, sales were tiny. By 2025, BYD was moving only around 4,000 vehicles a year in Japan. In a market of well over 4 million annual sales, that is a rounding error. It barely registers. The dealership network told a similar story. BYD had promised 100 sales outlets across Japan. Going into 2026, it had 69, counting locations still in planning, spread across 38 prefectures. The company itself admitted it struggled to even find suitable properties. Analysts looked at all of this and concluded what seemed obvious. Japan had won again. The fortress held, case closed. They were reading the wrong numbers, because while everyone was staring at the sales chart, BYD was collecting something far more valuable than customers. It was collecting information, 3 years of it. What do Japanese drivers actually complain about? Where do they charge? How do rural buyers shop for cars differently than Tokyo commuters? Which features do they touch in the showroom and which do they ignore? What does a Japanese family expect a small car to feel like? The sliding doors, the tall roof, the cup holders in exactly the right place. Every one of those 4,000 annual sales was a data point. Every underperforming dealership was a lesson in geography. Every lost customer was a note in a file. And quietly, back in China, BYD's engineers were doing something no foreign automaker had ever done. They were designing a Kei Car. Not a compact car, not a small EV that happened to be little. A true legally compliant, made for Japan only Kei Car. A vehicle that, by definition, could never be sold in BYD's home market or in Europe or anywhere else. A car with exactly one customer in mind. That is not how a company behaves when it is losing. That is how a company behaves when it is measuring. BYD was not failing in Japan, it was studying it. And in October 2025, at Tokyo Big Sight, the biggest exhibition center in the country, it finally showed everyone what those 3 years had been for. Part 3, the Otter, the Japan Mobility Show, October 2025, Tokyo. BYD's stand had plenty to look at. The updated Atto 3, the Sea Lion 6 plug-in hybrid, even the Yangwang U9, a Chinese electric supercar built to grab headlines. But the vehicle that stole the entire show was none of them. It was a tiny, boxy 4-seat minicar sitting on 13-inch wheels. BYD kept it rotating slowly on a display platform. Doors closed, interior hidden from the crowds pressing in with their phones. Photographers complained they could not get a clean shot inside. That secrecy was its own kind of statement. You do not guard a car like a state secret unless you believe it matters. BYD called it the Racco. In Japanese, Racco means sea otter. Read that again. A Chinese automaker gave its newest car a Japanese name for a Japanese animal, because the car itself exists for one country and one country only. The Racco is the first dedicated Kei car ever produced by a non-Japanese brand. The first in 76 years of the segment's existence. Let that sink in before we get to the specs, because the specs are where this stops being symbolic and starts being dangerous. The Racco measures 3,395 millimeters long, 1,475 wide, 1,800 tall. That is not an approximation of the K rules. That is millimeters from the legal maximum, the same footprint as the Honda N-Box, Japan's best-selling car. 4 seats. Sliding rear doors on both sides, exactly the feature Japanese families love. Because in a tight parking lot, a swinging door is a liability, a tall windshield, a flat floor, physical buttons for the climate control, because BYD apparently noticed that Japanese buyers find touchscreen-only cabins annoying. Under the floor sits a lithium iron phosphate blade battery built by FinDreams, BYD's own battery subsidiary. The base version carries 20 kilowatt hours, good for around 180 kilometers of range on Japan's WLTC test cycle, with a larger, roughly 30 kilowatt hour option planned for buyers who want more. A heat pump comes standard, which matters enormously in places like Hokkaido, where winter range is the first thing an EV skeptic will ask about. Now, if you live outside Japan, 180 kilometers of range probably sounds laughable. Hold that thought, because it misses how these cars are actually used. A Kei Car in Japan is not a road trip machine. It is the school run, the supermarket, the train station, the clinic. Short hops every day, parked at home every night. For that life, 180 kilometers is not a limitation. It is several days of driving between charges. BYD did not size this battery by accident. A smaller battery means a lighter car, a lower price, and margins that survive at 2.5 million yen. Every kilowatt hour it did not install is money it did not have to charge the customer. None of that, on its own, breaks the market. Here is what does. The Racco supports DC fast charging at up to 100 kilowatts. The Nissan Sakura, Japan's best-selling electric Kei car, the pride of the domestic EV effort, tops out at 30 kilowatts. Same size, same price bracket. 3 times the charging speed. In a country where apartment dwellers depend on public chargers, that single number changes the daily experience of owning the car. A top-up that eats your lunch break in a Sakura becomes a coffee stop in a Racco. BYD did not bring a Chinese car to Japan. It built a Japanese car in China. And when the official interior photos dropped in February 2026, Japanese social media did something nobody predicted. It got excited. One user wrote that they were ready to trade in their Honda N-Box. Others noted the little Otter was generating more hype than any BYD model ever had. Pre-orders open this summer, with sales expected between June and August 2026. The Fortress has a visitor at the gate, and it brought a price tag designed like a weapon. Part 4. The price is the message. Every number on the Racco's spec sheet is interesting. One number is a declaration of war, around 2.5 million yen, roughly 16,300 US dollars. Now hold that against the competition. The Nissan Sakura, the defending champion of electric Kei cars, starts at about 2.54 million yen. BYD did not undercut it by a shocking margin. It matched it, almost to the yen. And that, strangely, is the more aggressive move. A dramatically cheaper price would have told Japanese buyers exactly what many of them suspect about Chinese products. Cheap thing, cheap reasons. Matching the price says something else entirely. It says same money, better car, faster charging, standard heat pump, more equipment. Judge us feature by feature. That is a confident message, and confidence is precisely what foreign brands have historically lacked in Japan. Then the government steps in and makes the math sweeter. Japan offers EV purchase subsidies that can reach 550,000 yen, around $3,570 on eligible models. Apply that, and a brand new, fast-charging electric car from the world's biggest EV maker could land in a Japanese driveway for something in the neighborhood of 2 million yen. For a first car, a second car, a car for grandparents in a small town. That is genuinely disruptive money. So how can BYD afford to sell at Sakura money while packing in more hardware? This is where the company's real advantage shows, and it has nothing to do with Japan. BYD builds its own batteries through FinDreams. It builds its own motors. It builds many of its own chips. It even builds the ships that carry its cars across the ocean. When lithium prices swing or component costs spike, BYD absorbs the shock inside its own walls. Its Japanese rivals buying batteries and parts from suppliers feel every tremor. In a price war, the company that owns its supply chain decides where the floor is. Everyone else just falls to it. And here is the twist that reveals what this launch is really about. According to JP Morgan, the Racco will likely contribute just 1 to 2% of BYD's earnings in 2026. 1 to 2%. The company designed an entire vehicle from scratch for a single foreign country, knowing it would barely move the financial needle. You do not do that for profit, you do that for proof. Because if BYD can win over buyers in the hardest, most loyal, most protected car market on the planet, in the segment Japan considers its own backyard, then no market anywhere is safe. Japan is not the prize. Japan is the demonstration. If BYD can win here, it can win anywhere. And judging by what happened next, Japan understands that perfectly. Now, pause for a moment, because this is where the story splits from every version of it you might have half heard. Most coverage stops at the car. Cute Otter, low price, good specs, end of article. But the car is only the visible half of the plan. The other half is happening in places no camera crew has bothered to visit. And it is, honestly, the more radical move of the two. Because BYD's boldest play in Japan is not the Racco at all. It is where BYD decided to sell it. Part 5. The Invasion. Nobody is watching, and here is where the second half of this video's title earns its place. The part nobody is talking about. When a foreign car brand launches in Japan, the playbook is always the same. Open a glass flagship showroom in Tokyo, another in Osaka, maybe Nagoya. Pour money into the cities, chase the wealthy early adopters, and hope the countryside eventually notices you exist. BYD is doing the exact opposite, and almost no international outlet has picked up on it. In February 2026, Nikkei reported BYD's retail plan for the Racco launch. The company is opening what it calls mini dealerships, tiny outlets displaying just 1 or 2 cars, and it is deliberately placing them in remote cities with populations under 500,000. Not in glittering retail parks on the edge of Tokyo, in neighborhood shopping malls, in regional towns, in the kind of places where international car journalists never set foot. At first glance, that sounds like a budget compromise. Look closer, and it might be the smartest retail decision any foreign automaker has ever made in Japan. Because where do Kei cars actually live? Not in central Tokyo, where trains rule and parking spaces cost more than cars. Kei cars dominate rural Japan, small towns, mountain prefectures, places where a family runs 2 cars because the bus comes twice a day, where the N-Box is parked outside every grocery store, where the local dealer knows customers by name. Roughly 40% of Japan's new car sales come from this world, and it is a world the imports have always ignored. Atsuki Tofukuji, the president of BYD Auto Japan, explained the logic plainly. The goal is to cover small regional commercial areas, closer to the neighborhood mall than the big city showroom, and to make BYD feel like a local brand, not a foreign invader. Read between the lines, and the strategy gets even sharper. A mini store with 2 cars is cheap to open and fast to replicate. While a rival spends a year and a fortune building 1 flagship, BYD can seat a dozen small towns. Every outlet puts a real touchable Racco within a short drive of the exact customer the car was designed for. Someone who has bought Suzuki or Daihatsu their whole life and has never once been courted by anyone else. And because it is all happening in towns most coverage skips, the story stays quiet. The financial press watches Tokyo, the car press watches the motor shows. Meanwhile, the actual battle is being set up in shopping malls in regional Japan, 1 small storefront at a time. And there is a second front opening that almost nobody has connected to this story. BYD is also preparing a tiny electric truck for Japan, previewed as the T35, aimed at the light commercial vehicles that farmers, shopkeepers, and delivery drivers across rural Japan rely on every single day. Think about what that pairing means: a Kei car for the family driveway and a small electric truck for the family business, sold from the same small-town storefront. That is not a product launch. That is a plan to become part of the furniture of everyday rural Japanese life. Everyone watched for BYD in Tokyo. It showed up in towns most maps skip, which raises the obvious question. If the plan is this visible once you know where to look, what does Japan's car industry think about it? The answer leaked out in October, and it was not calm. Part 6. Japan notices. Japanese corporations do not panic in public, which is exactly why the quiet statements coming out of the industry are so telling. Start with Reuters. In October, the agency reported that a number of government officials and auto industry leaders privately admitted BYD represented a much-needed wake-up call for Japanese automakers. Companies that had spent the last decade focused primarily on hybrid technology while the EV wave built offshore. Sit with that phrase, a wake-up call. Officials do not use language like that about a brand selling 4,000 cars a year. They use it about a trajectory. Then there is Suzuki. Based in Hamamatsu, Suzuki is arguably the king of the Kei Car, a company whose identity is inseparable from small, affordable Japanese vehicles. Suzuki has publicly flagged BYD as a significant threat in the Kei segment. When the master of the fortress names the newcomer at the gate, the newcomer has officially arrived. And notice the timing of Suzuki's concern. This is a company that has survived every wave of foreign competition for decades, precisely because its home segment was untouchable. Suzuki does not rattle easily. If its leadership is naming a specific rival in public, it is because the internal analysis told them something the public sales numbers do not yet show. To understand why the anxiety runs this deep, you have to see the strategic trap Japan built for itself. Japanese automakers made a collective bet over the past decade that hybrids, not pure EVs, were the sensible path. Commercially, at home, the bet worked. Fewer than 30,000 battery electric vehicles were sold in all of Japan in the first half of 2025. The domestic EV market stayed tiny, so domestic EV investment stayed cautious. Nissan built the Sakura, Mitsubishi built the EKX EV, Honda has begun rolling out the N1E, and beyond that, the electric key shelf is nearly bare. That caution made perfect sense. Right up until a company with the world's largest EV output decided to aim directly at the gap. BYD spent those same years building batteries by the gigawatt and iterating car after car in the most brutal price war on earth, the Chinese domestic market. Now it is bringing all of that scale to bear on a segment where its Japanese rivals field, essentially one aging champion charging at 30 kilowatts. And the most uncomfortable signal is not coming from boardrooms at all. It is coming from ordinary buyers. When the Racco's dedicated website went live in February 2026, Japanese social media lit up. People compared it favorably to cars they already owned. Someone offered to trade in their N-Box. The consistent theme was surprise. This thing looks good, and it is one of us, a proper Kei car, just wearing a different badge. The scariest reviews were not from critics. They were from customers. Now, before this starts sounding like BYD has already won, stop. It has not. And the honest version of this story includes some very real problems. Part 7. What could still go wrong? Every story like this comes with a temptation, and the temptation is to declare the ending early. Plenty of channels will. They will show you the Otter, read you the price, and tell you Japan's car industry is finished. That is not analysis. That is a thumbnail. The truth is messier, and the messier version is the one worth your time. Because the obstacles in BYD's way are not small, and how the company handles them will decide whether this becomes a historic breakthrough or an expensive lesson. So let's look at them clearly. Start with range. The base Racco offers around 180 kilometers on the WLTC cycle. For city errands and school runs, that is plenty. But in a Hokkaido winter, with the heater working and the cold biting into battery chemistry, that number will shrink. The standard heat pump helps. It does not repeal physics. Rural drivers, the exact customers BYD is targeting, sometimes drive long distances, and a Suzuki with a fuel tank never worries about a charger. The larger battery option will matter here, and the burden of proof sits with BYD, not the customer. Next, the sales math. BYD has set a target of 10,000 annual vehicle sales in Japan. From roughly 4,000 in 2025, that means finding an additional 6,000 buyers, largely on the back of one small car. The company's own president has admitted the dealer network is already constraining growth. 69 outlets against domestic brands whose dealerships blanket every prefecture and whose service relationships go back generations. That is a real gap, and small mall storefronts can only close part of it. Then there is the wall you cannot see: trust. Japanese consumers are famously loyal and famously careful, and skepticism toward Chinese-branded products runs deep in some quarters. A Kei car is not a gadget, it is the family's daily lifeline, bought with the expectation of a decade of faultless service. BYD has to prove not just that the Racco is good on day one, but that parts, servicing, and resale value will hold up in year 8. That proof takes years, and no marketing budget can shortcut it. There's also the infrastructure question hanging over the whole plan. The Racco's headline feature is 100 kilowatt fast charging, but a fast car needs fast chargers. And rural Japan, the very territory BYD is targeting, is exactly where high-powered public charging is thinnest. If a buyer in a small mountain town cannot actually find a charger that uses the Racco's biggest advantage, that advantage lives only on the spec sheet. BYD is betting that Japan's charging network grows into the car. That is a reasonable bet. It is still a bet. And Japan's automakers will not stand still. Honda's electric N1e is already reaching customers. Nissan can update the Sakura. Suzuki and Daihatsu have decades of key engineering muscle and dealer networks that reach into every valley in the country. History says incumbents this entrenched usually respond hard, and Japanese incumbents, once provoked, respond very hard indeed. So no, one small electric Otter does not conquer a market. Minds do not change overnight, and market share is won one skeptical customer at a time. But keep one distinction in view, because it is the entire point of this story. One car does not win a market. It can, however, end an assumption. And the assumption that no outsider could ever build a real Kei car, the assumption that held for 76 years, is already gone. It ended the day the Racco rolled onto that stage at Tokyo Big Sight, whatever the sales charts say next. Which brings us to the final question. If the profit is small and the fight is hard, what is BYD actually playing for? Part 8, the real game. Zoom all the way out, and the Racco stops looking like a car and starts looking like a rehearsal. Here is the detail that gives the game away. The Racco is one of the first vehicles BYD has ever developed exclusively for a foreign market. Not a global model with the steering wheel moved, a ground-up design for one country's laws, one country's roads, one country's families. That capability, study a foreign market for 3 years, engineer a bespoke product for it, price it against the local champion, and distribute it through a localized retail network, is not a car. It is a playbook. And BYD now has the footprint to run that playbook almost anywhere. The company operates in roughly 70 countries, with somewhere between 900 and 1,000 retail outlets worldwide. It has built or is building factories in Brazil, Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, Hungary, and Turkey. It sailed past Tesla to become the world's largest EV maker. As competition at home in China grows more brutal by the quarter, every one of those overseas markets becomes more important. And every one of them is watching what happens in Japan. Because Japan is the stress test, the single hardest market for any foreign automaker in its single most protected segment. Think of it as a message written in steel and lithium. If the playbook works here, it works everywhere. Tight European city car regulations, Southeast Asian budget segments. Any market, anywhere, that ever assumed it was too local, too specific, too loyal for an outsider to crack. There is one more audience for this demonstration, and it might be the most important one. Japan's own automakers, watching from Yokohama and Hamamatsu and Toyota City, now have to answer a question they have never faced before. If a rival can out-engineer them inside their own most protected category, the category they invented, the category written into their own national law, what exactly is still safe? The Kei car was supposed to be the one segment where scale, cost, and foreign ambition could never reach. If that assumption falls, every other assumption gets re-examined. That is what a wake-up call actually means, not fear of one small car. Fear of what the car proves is possible. Remember where this story started. 76 years, 4 dominant companies, one fortress that Ford, Volkswagen, and Tesla never even attempted. A wall built not from law but from difficulty. And difficulty, it turns out, was only a wall until someone treated it as a to-do list. Sometime between June and August 2026, the first Raccos will reach Japanese driveways. Little electric Otters with sliding doors parked outside grocery stores in towns most of the world has never heard of. Maybe BYD sells 5,000 of them. Maybe 50,000. Follow the launch closely because the number will be reported everywhere as the verdict. It is not the verdict. In a sense, it almost does not matter anymore. Because the question was never really whether BYD could sell a car in Japan. The question was whether Japan's walls still worked, whether any market on Earth is still too closed, too loyal, too protected for the world's biggest EV machine to enter. And we already know the answer.